The field of health tech is buzzing, and there are many exciting innovations being developed using data held by various NHS organizations. However, navigating the health tech innovation space can be confusing, particularly when it comes to regulation. This short video is here to help you understand the high-level steps you need to take, the organizations you will need to be in touch with, and some general advice about how to innovate safely. There are several statutory and regulatory bodies that participate in the innovation journey. There are 5 regulators you must consider. The Information Commissioner's Office is responsible for upholding data rights and enforcing the Data Protection Act and the General Data Protection Regulation. The Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency ensures that medicines and medical devices meet the standards of safety, quality, and efficacy. The MHRA oversees the notified bodies that ensure medical device manufacturers comply with regulatory requirements before placing their devices on the market. They also have responsibility for the post-market surveillance of drugs and medical devices. The Health Research Authority regulates research using medical data in the UK. It ensures that research is ethically reviewed and approved. You must contact the HRA if you're doing a research project which requires medical data. The Care Quality Commission polices the quality of care services in England. The CQC ensures that patients receive effective and high-quality care. They also inspect, rate, and monitor services. They might fine or even prosecute providers that do not meet the standards. The General Medical Council regulates doctors and psychiatrists. The GMC also oversees medical education and training and sets the standards for doctors. There are also a number of statutory and arm's-length bodies that issue guidance at different stages of the innovation process. NHS England and NHS Improvement set out the strategic direction and priorities for the healthcare system in England, oversees the planning, commissioning, and delivery of care services, and supports foundation trusts, NHS trusts, and independent providers to deliver high-quality care. The National Institute for Healthcare Excellence issues guidance for health and social care practitioners, as well as metrics and standards for commissioners. The NHS National Research and Development Forum is a professional network of health and social care practitioners which champions high-quality research, creates standards, and shares best practice. NHS Digital produces information standards and gives advice to health and care organizations on information and cybersecurity. They issue guidance for app developers to ensure that apps placed on the NHS Apps Library perform against important criteria. The National Data Guardian ensures that health and care information is safeguarded and used appropriately. The National Institute for Health Research is the largest funder of health and care research in Europe. The NIHR works with universities and other key partners in the health ecosystem and provides guidance and support for conducting clinical research. There are several other players that have a stake in this stage. Health Data Research UK makes health data available to researchers and innovators to develop products and scientific research. HDR UK is also leading on the creation of the digital innovation hubs which will help advance scientific research and digital innovation in the UK. They also engage with the public on issues involving the use of medical data for research. The Medical Research Council is responsible for coordinating and funding medical research in the UK. It offers grants for health technology and innovation and collaborates with industry to do so. The Wellcome Trust funds scientific research in the field of biomedical science, population health, and medical innovation. It also supports researchers to develop healthcare innovations through grant funding and programs such as the Innovators Award. The Academic Health Science Network helps innovators connect with a wider network of entrepreneurs and navigate the innovation pathway. It can also provide guidance to understand the NHS landscape and advise NHS organisations on commissioning and procurement. It provides funding through its Accelerator programme. Innovate UK provides funding and information to policy and decision makers within the NHS about emerging technologies that may have an impact on patients or on the provision of health services in the future. Patient and patient groups can help innovators and entrepreneurs better understand patients' unmet needs and priorities. This can help inform the design and deployment of new healthcare technologies. Charities can also provide information on patients' priorities and unmet needs. They can help entrepreneurs conduct user research or test their innovation with patients. They also play a role in raising awareness of innovations among healthcare professionals and in spreading best practice. Clinical commissioning groups within NHS England are responsible for assessing local needs, deciding priorities and strategies, and commissioning healthcare services for their local area. Gov.uk provides information about government contracts as well as guidance on how to sell to the public sector. NHS Business Services Authority provides support services to NHS organisations, contractors and patients. They can help entrepreneurs navigate the NHS contracting and procurement landscape. NHS Supply Chain manages the sourcing, delivery and supply of healthcare products to the NHS. Supply Chain provides an integrated repository of current contracts which innovators can consult. They also have a role in speeding up market access for health tech products by supporting the introduction of new technologies into existing frameworks. NHSX is a unit within NHS England whose mission is to speed up the digital transformation of the NHS and social care. NHSX sets national policy for NHS technology, digital and data, as well as standards for user experience, information governance, and interoperability. In May 2020, there will be a change in the regulatory landscape with the new Medical Devices Regulation and In Vitro Diagnostic Regulation. The MDR covers medical devices such as apps and software, reagents, appliances, and other articles intended by manufacturers to be used alone or in combination for human beings. The IVDR covers medical devices such as apps and softwares, reagents, pieces of equipment or system intended by the manufacturer to be used in vitro for the examination of specimens, including blood and tissue donations derived from the human body. The Medicine and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, also known as the MHRA, provides very clear guidance about the changes that will be introduced. Some of the major changes include that many software products and apps will be upclassed. Manufacturers will have to appoint at least one person responsible for regulatory compliance, and increased post-market surveillance responsibilities will be imposed on manufacturers. The innovation and regulatory compliance process presented in this video has been divided into 3 stages. 1. The idea generation and data access stage. 2. The proof of concept stage. 3. The regulatory compliance and post-market surveillance stage. There are many different types of players who can generate innovative ideas to improve healthcare, such as healthcare practitioners, academics, charities, patients, small innovators, and larger private sector organizations. There are a few tips that you should be aware of before starting on the innovation journey. Commercially, you need to consider if your idea is feasible, has a clear intended use and population, is viable, is state-of-the-art, is innovative. You also need to identify who will pay for this innovation. That means both your funding and reimbursement route. Currently, reimbursement frameworks in the NHS can be fragmented and differ from one organization to the other. There are various organizations that can help you on the commercial side, like your local academic health science network, clinical commissioning group, trust, or NICE's Office for Market Access. Organizations like Innovate UK and the Wellcome Trust and many others can help you with funding. On the regulatory side, you will also have to make some considerations and figure out which regulatory requirements apply to you. You will need to be very clear about how your idea is classified, as your product can either be a medical device, an in vitro diagnostic medical device, a borderline medical device, or not a medical device. The MHRA provides very clear guidance about all of these categories. You will also need to consider the risk classification of the device so that you can build the appropriate evidence needed from a very early stage. Remember that the new MDR and IVDR will upclass many software products and devices. In addition to the Medical Devices Regulation, you will need to consider other pieces of legislation such as the Human Rights Act and the Equality Act. This might be obvious to you, but they are the only pieces of legislation that can be used to protect users against any type of bias. You might also want to consider signing to the Department of Health and Social Care's Code of Conduct for Data-Driven Technologies in Health and Care. Before accessing data held by an organization within the healthcare system, you consider a few legal requirements such as the Data Protection Regulation, the Common Law Duty of Confidentiality, and Caldecott principles. Broadly speaking, this means that you need to be very clear about the type of data you need, who is viewing it, the purpose for using that data, that you're not asking for more data than what you need, and finally, you also need to be clear about your legal basis under data protection regulation and common law. In other words, what is your legal justification for both viewing and processing data? In health and care, you can process data for two main reasons. 1, to provide direct care to individuals. 2, to improve health and social care services through research and planning, also known as secondary uses. The ICO and National Data Guardian provide very clear guidance on information governance. The General Medical Council provides a useful online tool to help practitioners navigate the duty of confidentiality and data sharing. This navigator can be found on their website. At this stage, you may want to consider performing a data protection impact assessment and think about the types of privacy-enhancing technologies you might want to use when accessing data. Once you have considered these information governance standards and have a clear legal basis, you can consider accessing data. There are different types of data that you can access, and each will require separate legal considerations. You can access individual level data with varying degrees of anonymization. You can access data about things, such as stock of medical supplies. You can also access aggregated statistics. There are many organizations who hold data within healthcare and many datasets you could potentially use. You can find several centrally held datasets like the hospital episode statistics held by NHS Digital, or the Clinical Practice Research Data Link, also known as CPRD, held by the MHRA. Public Health England makes many different types of aggregated data available on their website, and the UK Biobank also provides a rich source of information. However, much of the data is still held at trust or GP practice level. HDR UK's digital innovation hubs should also eventually act as a single point of access to healthcare data within a specific area. Once you have identified what data you need and who the data controller is, along with any data processors and the necessary approvals are in place, you can submit a data access request. Different organizations have slightly different forms. NHS Digital provides a template of its own forms which you can find on their website. If your data access request is for research purposes, you need to contact the Health Research Authority. If your request is for confidential patient information and you're not part of the care team and not seeking explicit patient consent under common law, then you will need to go through the Confidentiality Advisory Group, also known as CAG, to avoid possible breach of the common law duty of confidentiality. Once your request is approved, you will need to sign a strategic research agreement and a data processing protocol, stipulating how you will carry out the research and how you will process data. You should also consider reviewing the Model Clinical Investigation Agreement templates produced by UK Clinical Research Collaboration, which can help you draw up collaboration agreements with NHS trusts. As there currently is no one responsible for regulating data quality, it is your responsibility as an innovator to assess the quality of the data you are using to develop your tool. You should think about testing for biases in your data and other limitations your data might have. People can often get confused about what data protection regulation means in practice. It is a part of the innovation process where there are often misinterpretations. To clarify things, we will go through some case scenarios to unpick a few common mistakes. Misconception 1. If you're not part of the care team and you're looking to access and process data to develop a product that will eventually be used to provide individual care, you can say that your legal basis is implied consent under common law. This is wrong. At the development stage, you're accessing and processing data for secondary purposes and not to deliver individual care. Misconception 2. If you're developing a piece of software using data held by a health or care organization, it isn't classified as medical research. This is also wrong. Any secondary use that involves researching, developing, or testing a product using data held by a health or care organization is always classed as research. Misconception 3. If you're a health and care organization that is anonymizing data in order to share it with an innovator, you can just go ahead and do so, whether you are joint controllers or are in a data controller/data processor relationship. This is wrong. You need to be clear about what the relationship is and allows, what data is required, and what your purpose is. If you want to use anonymous data, then you must be clear how that data will be anonymized and by whom, and what the legal basis is. Depending on the type of device you're intending to build, which can either be a CE mark device or a non-CE mark device, you will need to undergo different processes. For a CE mark device, you must first ensure that your product is effective and performs as intended. To do this, you might decide to test your product with users, conduct questionnaires, or do clinical research. A number of organizations like the National Institute for Health Research, HDR UK, and the NHS's Research and Development Forum can help you design and set up a clinical study. Notified bodies can also provide guidance at this stage. You might also consider partnering up with a university or other research institution. At this point, it is crucial that you consider how intellectual property rights will be apportioned to avoid issues in the future. You might also want to consult NICE's Pathways, an interactive tool which can help you navigate NICE's guidance on specific topic and access quality standards and tools. Also, if your research project involves medical data, it is crucial that you obtain approval from the Health Research Authority, who can also help you assess the governance and ethics of your project. Depending on whether your project is a medical device or an in vitro diagnostic medical device, you will need to provide different types of clinical evidence to obtain CE marking. If your product is a medical device, you will need to conduct a clinical investigation. For an in vitro diagnostic medical device, you'll need to do a performance evaluation. The aim of both processes is the same: to demonstrate the device complies with regulation and meets the essential requirements of safety and performance. The MHRA provides detailed guidance on how to go about conducting a clinical investigation and a performance evaluation. It is worth noting that in some very specific instances, you don't need to notify the MHRA of a clinical investigation or a performance evaluation. An example would be an NHS trust manufacturing a device in-house for its own patients with no intention to place it on the market. It is commonly called the in-house exemption, and it allows to innovate safely in a controlled environment. Finally, if you're planning to work with the NHS, you will need to consider NICE's evidence standards. These can help you determine the type and level of evidence you must provide for commissioning and reimbursement purposes. This is not a mandatory process, but following NICE's guidelines is advisable. The World Health Organization also issues best practice guidance on how to develop digital health products. NICE's online meta tool can help you understand the level of evidence needed to show your product's value to the NHS and identify any data gaps that may delay your product reaching the market. You can find more information on NICE's website. Different organizations can also assist you in identifying funding opportunities and connecting you with experts, as explained at the start of this video. For non-CE mark products, you will follow a similar process. You will still have to conduct preliminary research to evidence the safety and performance of your device and might work with a university or research institution to do so. You might also want to consult NICE's Pathways. Don't forget that if your research involves medical data, you will need to obtain approval from the Health Research Authority. NHS Digital's digital assessment questions can help you understand whether your product performs well against a set of criteria, including complexity, clinical effectiveness, and data protection. You might also want to review the NHS's apps library, which includes a selection of NHS-validated apps. Finally, NHS Digital's clinical risk management standards set out further criteria relating to clinical safety. Even though the product will not be going through a CE marking process, you will still need to provide sufficient evidence to demonstrate the safety and performance of the product. In some cases, a clinical investigation might be required depending on the strength of your commercial claims. You might also consider abiding by NICE's evidence standards and the World Health Organization's guidelines. You can also use NICE's meta tool as explained earlier in this video. Different organizations like catapults and accelerators can help you identify funding opportunities and put you in touch with experts. There are three types of risk classification under the old and new medical device and in vitro diagnostic medical device regulatory regime. The MHRA provides clear guidelines on device risk classification, which is available on their website. As mentioned previously, one of the main changes brought about by the MDR and IVDR 2020 is the upclassing of many software devices and apps, as well as the appointment of a person responsible for the entire regulatory process within a company. That person will have responsibilities covering quality management, regulatory documentation, post-market surveillance, and vigilance reporting. The CE marking process for both medical devices and in vitro diagnostic medical devices is quite similar. First, you need to carry out a conformity assessment based on the risk classification of your device. For devices that are Class 2 and above, these conformity assessments will be carried out by notified bodies under the instruction of the MHRA. If this assessment is successful, a declaration or certification of conformity is then given out depending on the risk classification. This will allow you to apply the CE mark on your medical device or in vitro diagnostic medical device. NHS Digital also provides guidance and toolkits on interoperability, cybersecurity, and data deletions on their website. There is currently no standard protocol for validating algorithms. However, the MHRA and NHS Digital are carrying out a research project to see how synthetic data might be used to validate algorithms. As there is no one responsible for regulating data quality, it is vital that you assess the quality of the data you have used to develop your product. You should have thought of testing for bias in your data or other limitations and made sure that this is reflected in the intended use of the device and your commercial claims. Once your product is on the market, you will need to identify the appropriate reimbursement and procurement routes. There are several bodies that can help you with this, as mentioned in the start of this video. Once you get commissioned by an NHS organization, you will have to go through a pre-deployment phase in which you will need to complete many administrative tasks like signing contracts or understanding what local IT systems you might need to plug into and how. You will need to submit a data access request to test your tool in the clinical setting you will eventually deploy in, as well as performing the necessary tests you need to do before going live. Once this pre-deployment phase is over, you will implement your solution and integrate it into service delivery. You should be careful if your device is used in combination with another, as there are very specific rules around this. The MHRA provides very clear guidelines on this. There are several post-market surveillance mechanisms that apply to manufacturers, medical practitioners, and patients. There are a whole host of proactive post-market surveillance mechanisms, such as a manufacturer's post-market surveillance system, plan and report, post-market clinical follow-ups, or customer surveys and focus groups. There are also reactive post-market surveillance mechanisms, such as the Yellow Card Scheme, the National Reporting and Learning System, ICO investigations, as well as CQC inspections. There are several bodies that have a role at this stage, as explained in the start of the video. Throughout your deployment phase within a service, you need to think about developing real-world evidence. This video is based on a research project that Reform did in collaboration with NHSX. We hope you found it useful, and please visit our website for more detailed content on the regulation of data-driven technologies in healthcare.